Thank you for joining me back here on the show to continue sort of talking about the Kansas City Chiefs in relation to the last topic, talking about the Houston Texans and whether or not they are going to be a threat to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs. Now we're going to focus in on them and their additions. How have they gotten better this year? And one of the main pieces of that is Xavier Worthy, the wide receiver out of Texas that the Chiefs traded up with the Buffalo Bills to draft at number 28 this year in the first round. Right away, I knew that this was going to happen. Of course, it was going to happen once. As soon as Xavier Worthy broke that record for the 40-yard dash, right away, everybody knew that he was going to be on the Chiefs. Don't even lie about it. The comparisons to Tyreek Hill right from that moment were inevitable. I saw it. It was going to happen. And the way that the receiver class was stacked up with Rome Odunze, with Marvin Harrison, and some of these guys really dominating the top of the list, it was very evident that there was going to be a situation where Xavier Worthy was going to be there late in the first round, falling right into the lap of the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's exactly what happened. And now comes the hard part, I guess, for Xavier Worthy, because there's not going to be any of this easing the rookie in, taking it easy on him. He's on a Super Bowl winning team, and usually what that means is that they have established players everywhere. If they just won the Super Bowl, they're not going to have any glaring needs at any positions, you would think. But that wasn't the case so much with the Chiefs last year because their wide receiver group was very much a problem, and their offense didn't look like anything that we've ever seen from the Chiefs, and especially Andy Reid, and even especially Patrick Mahomes, obviously, with how talented and obviously how good he is. But with that being the case, and this idea of having Xavier Worthy now coming into this team, Patrick Mahomes mentioned it in a news conference on Tuesday. He had a quote that I actually had pulled up here for you guys. He said, "There's no easing. He's going to have to be ready to go. We got a lot of competition on this offense. He got a lot of mental work in these last few weeks that he had during OTAs, minicamp, but it's time to go now," talking about Xavier Worthy. I have a comment here, Anthony Manzano. Does Kansas City have enough capital to trade for Brandon Ayuk? That's a great question. That is a great question. I think they could. I think if they could have trade, like an Xavier Worthy, a first round pick, a second round pick, or maybe Marquise Brown, some of these guys that make up this offense, because we're talking about the Chiefs that last year we had Patrick Mahomes recently make a comment about last year and how last year went. Yeah, they won the Super Bowl. Yeah, it all ended great for them, as great as it could have went for them. But he mentioned that during the regular season, it wasn't that fun playing on offense. They had a lot of struggles. And quite honestly, this offense looked pretty pedestrian at times. And that's saying a lot when you have a generational, quite possibly the greatest quarterback ever, as your leader of that team. To say that the offense was pedestrian, I think that now heading into this year, to have that sort of identity back now with an Xavier Worthy, or to get to your question, to trade for Brandon Ayuk, I think that could be a major blockbuster move to already add to this team that doesn't obviously need a lot to win the Super Bowl, because last year the receivers weren't that, eye-popping off of the roster, off of their positional groups, looking at Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, and quite honestly, that might be the only two players I could name on their offense right off the top of my head. Mecole Hardman is another one, but it's not the name of Brandon Ayuk. They're not in the same conversation in terms of level of wide receiver. They showed that they could win a Super Bowl with that group of guys. If you had a guy like Brandon Ayuk, they definitely have the capital, in my opinion, if they trade some of these receivers that they have now, plus a first or a second round pick. I think that the 49ers, with how that situation is going also, with Brandon Ayuk now requesting a trade and sort of trying to be more of a problem to get what he wants, a contract or just being traded, I think it could be something that the 49ers would be foolish not to at least entertain if really they're not going to pay Brandon Ayuk. I think it is an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it, but I think if the Chiefs really wanted to do it, I think they could get the capital somewhere with an Xavier Worthy, a couple picks as well thrown in there to get Brandon Ayuk on the team. And that's a good question. I never really thought about that popping up or being a scenario, but I believe it could happen. But more on Xavier Worthy, if he does stay on this team and doesn't get traded for Brandon Ayuk. Um, last year, to just emphasize this offense a little bit more, last year with this offense and how slowly it started finding their footing over the course of the entire year. Last year, the Kansas City offense had the most amount of drops, or the highest percentage in drops for their receivers at 6.9%. And you saw just in that first game right off the bat how much they struggled and just how bad they looked against the Detroit Lions. Yeah, they got a little bit better as the season went on. You found a gem in Rashee Rice, but even with that all being the case, I felt like it was more so a year where Andy Reid really showed up and really showed out in terms of scheme, getting this offense to look a lot better than it did, rather than how teams are typically built up in terms of having a great offense. Usually when teams have a top 5 offense, they have a talented, very skilled, pretty much full package wide receiver like Tyreek with the Dolphins, like the Bengals with Jamar, like the Cowboys do with CeeDee Lamb. When you have a top offense, you usually have the guy on that team, and this Chiefs team didn't really have that last year at all. And I think that it showed more of what Andy Reid is capable of and how great of a play caller he was, that they won the Super Bowl not having one of these guys, but still coming through in some of the big moments, that he was able to scheme up something great, draw up a great play that made it easier for some of these guys to shine, just showing off some more of his brilliance as one of the best, if not the best head coach currently in the NFL. But now it's crazy when you think about this team, because like I keep saying, they won the Super Bowl last year, and now you're adding Marquise Brown in the offseason, Rashee Rice, depending on how the suspension goes, how many games he gets for that car accident he was involved in Texas at some point this offseason. I don't know exactly how far away or how far ago it was, but you have those two guys, and now you add Xavier Worthy to this team. This wide receiver trio has just completely been really just flipped on its head from what they had last year. Compared to what they had last year, to have this trio in right now makes a world of difference, I think, for this offense, and just how much it's really going to play out for them and how much it's going to impact them. Because, like I mentioned with that comparison to Tyreek Hill, they haven't had that sort of guy where you saw it that year, how unstoppable their offense was that year. They haven't had a guy like that in a couple of years now, where you can get as close as you can get with a guy like Xavier Worthy. Marquise Brown is also a speedster that could take the roof off of a defense. Having those two guys in there now to go along with Travis Kelce, it makes a world of difference, because now you have two extremely fast guys on the outside, Rashee Rice as well in there with that group. You're going to have the secondary pushback just as a precaution to start off the drive, to start off a play, because you can't get beat deep. And then what that does is just open up the middle of the field so much more for Travis Kelce, who might need a little bit more help now getting open. He isn't so much in his prime. He's still probably the best tight end in the NFL, but I think you saw it last year that it is going to require a bit more help for Travis to get open and become a real impact in this game as he gets into his latter years. Having these two absolute speed demons on the outside is just going to open up the middle of the field a lot more for him. And you have that, obviously, that opens up the running game more. You can't stack the box too much. And Isaiah Pacheco, who is an underrated running back, is going to have just a field day with that. I have a very hard time finding a glaring need for the Chiefs as of right now heading into 2024. If it plays out as well as I'm expecting it to, of course, things could go wrong, like injuries or just the development is taking a little bit longer than expected. But if everything goes according to plan, like it usually does for the Chiefs, I can't put my finger on anything that I'm thinking that it's going to stop them from three-peating at this point to win a Super Bowl. Maybe their offensive line and the depth there, maybe corner. I know they have Trent McDuffie, but outside of that, who else is going to step up after L'Jarius Sneed moved on? Those are some questionable things, but they're not massive holes that they need to fill up right away. They clearly feel confident about where their team is right now. And if they have this offense looking at least a little bit better than what they did last year, it's going to make a world of difference. And Xavier Worthy is going to probably play a big role in that, considering that the suspension with Rashee Rice, he could be thrown right into the mix right out of the gate. And how he takes advantage of that opportunity will determine how much of an impact he can make just in his first year as a Kansas City Chief. But the Chiefs are good, basically, at the end of the day. No surprise. They're going to be in the mix. It's going to be almost virtually impossible, I should say, to stop them on offense. But we're going to see. They're on the verge of making history. We'll see if they actually get it done this year in 2024. But that'll be that for that segment. We're going to head to the last break of this show, and when we return, one more topic to talk about. Montez Sweat gives his opinion on the differences between the Bears defense that he is on right now compared to the Washington Commanders defense that he played on for so many years when he got drafted by them. What did he say, and what are the expectations for this Chiefs defense, for the Bears defense, going forward in 2024? We'll be right back to talk about Montez Sweat and the Chicago Bears.